The Trouble with Herbert by Heather Isles, illustrated by Wendy Smith. Contents: Chapter 1, page 5, Chapter 2, page 9, Chapter 3, page 23, Chapter 4, page 43. 1. Here is the class. Hello, hiya, hi. And here is Mrs. Bagnall, their teacher. Good morning, everybody. The children call her Baggy Pants, but not when she can hear them. Here are some interesting members of the class. Colin Crybaby, who is always crying about nothing. Biffo the Bully, who is always making Colin cry. Rachel Rushaway, the fastest girl in school. And Brian Brainbox, the smartest boy in the world. He really is the smartest boy in the world. Someone has to be. And there are lots more. Here they are, all trying to speak at once. Actually, my name is... Jeff, you're standing on my turn. The class has a guinea pig called Herbert. He will be very important later in this book. He likes eating, especially corn and carrots. Watch out. 2. This chapter is the story of Fred, the class corn plant, who grew from a seed to a shoot, to a baby corn plant, to a great big bushy plant. The children watered Fred, fed him, polished him until he shone, and showed him off to all their visitors. Meet Fred. How do you do? One day something knobby poked out of Fred's side. It grew bigger and bigger every day until it was a great big corn on the cob with a feathery top. The children were very proud of Fred. They made a card for him, and they all signed it in their best handwriting. The whole school came to see Fred. Gasp! Wonderful! Never seen anything like it. Now, said Baggy Pants, sorry, Mrs. Bagnall, when are we going to eat him? Eat him? Cried the children. Oh no! Oh no! How could you eat him? Poor Fred! Horrible! Colin Crybaby burst into tears. Boo-hoo! As usual. That started off Biffo the Bully. Colin's a crybaby, as usual. But everyone else felt like crying too. That afternoon, Rachel Rushaway was in charge of giving Herbert the guinea pig his food. She was in such a hurry, as usual, that she left the door of the cage open. It was only open a tiny bit, but that was enough for Herbert to get his nose through. He sniffed, he wiggled, he pushed, he was out. Here is Herbert, always hungry. Here is Fred, ready to be eaten. The next morning, the class was very quiet when Miss Bagnall came in. What's the matter? She asked. Silence, not a word. Speak to me, class, she said. Silence. The children pointed to Fred, then they pointed to Herbert. Herbert looked very fat and sleepy. He was smiling. Ah, said Mrs. Bagnall. I see. Well, that's what plants are for, you know, eating. Colin started to cry. Biffo pinched Rachel. Rachel started to cry. The whole class started to cry. Boo-hoo. Then Miss Bagnall, started to cry. Why are you all crying, Miss Bagnall? Asked Brian Brainbox. If plants are for eating. Because I wanted to eat him myself, said Miss Bagnall, with lots of butter. Pop! Herbert looked very smug. 3. This chapter is about Herbert again. Now, when Herbert escaped that day, he found he liked it. Every chance he got, he was out of his cage again and on his way. He would find a hole to crawl into, a corner to hide in, a blanket to crawl under. Herbert shaped. The next day, the children would have to look for him. Yoo-hoo! Over, under, Herbert, beside, where are you? They always found him in the end. Over here! Found him! Up here! Miss Bagnall! Down here! Here he is! One day Herbert was bored, gloom, fed up. He hadn't escaped in a long time. He looked around. His cage was not locked. Then he looked again. The classroom door was open, just a crack. He looked a third time. The children were busy. Nobody was looking at Herbert. Everyone was working hard. Herbert squeezed out of his cage, down the table leg, and out the door. Suddenly, Brian Brainbox, who had finished his math first, he always did, shouted, "Herbert, he's escaped! There was pandemonium!" That means a lot of noise. "Follow that guinea pig! Herbert's missing! He went that-a-way! No, that-a-way!" Rachel Rushaway, the fastest girl in school, flew after Herbert. She ran, zoom, out of the door, rush down the first stairs, crash out of the school doors, and round the playground. But she didn't catch Herbert. Herbert hadn't gone that way. Herbert had gone zzz, zzz, to sleep. Brian Brainbox thought he knew where Herbert was. Brain power! This is what he thought guinea pigs like: 1. Food, 2. More food, 3. Warmth, 4. Comfort, 5. Yet more food. He was right, of course. Herbert, always hungry, had smelled delicious smells. Sniff, sniff. He had followed his nose along the corridor, down the back stairs, and into the kitchen where the cooks were cooking lunch. Delicious smells. He licked his lips. He could smell his second favorite food. Carrots, yummy carrots, piles and piles of them. The cooks were busy making a pie for lunch. They didn't see Herbert. He began to eat. He ate, and he ate, and he ate, until he could eat no more. Then he fell asleep. Zzz. Just then the class led by Brian Brainbox rushed through the kitchen door. He's very fat. Have you seen Herbert? And brown. I know he's here, said Brian Brainbox. He likes corn and carrots. Carrots. The cooks looked. Brian looked. The children looked. Herbert! He's eaten all the carrots, piles and piles of them. They were all gone. Eek! Shrieked one of the cooks. A rat! Pardon me, said Brian. Herbert's not a rat. He's a... Herbert moved. Stop him, someone shouted. He's trying to get away. But Herbert was now too fat to run anywhere. He was soon back in his cage. Miss Bagnall, got a new padlock for Herbert's cage, and only she had the key. She kept it in the top right-hand drawer of her desk. This fact is important for the next chapter. By the way, Rachel Rushaway wasn't still whizzing around the playground. When Herbert was found, she made her way back to the classroom very quickly. 4. The sky was blue, fluffy clouds, the sun was shining, and the class was miserable. Phew, too hot. It's much too nice to stay indoors every day, said Baggy Pants. Let's go on a picnic this week. Herbert thought that was a good idea. But Herbert has to stay behind, she added. Unfair to guinea pigs. Biffo the bully had other ideas. Biffo knew where Miss Bagnall kept the key to Herbert's cage. Psst, it's okay, Herbert. I've got an idea. On the day of the picnic, the bus arrived. 25 children got on the bus with 25 lunch boxes. Lunch, even more lunch. Baggy Pants got on. Sorry, Miss Bagnall. The bus driver got on, and so did Herbert in Biffo's pocket. Herbert started to squeak with excitement. Squeak, squeak! Be quiet, Herbert, said Biffo. You'll get me in trouble. But the class was singing so loudly that nobody heard Herbert. Row, row, row your boat. At last they came to a beautiful park with trees and swings and hills to roll down, and the best of all, a wonderful boating lake. Everyone wanted to go boating. I said it first. I go first. Me first. Me. Except Colin Crybaby. Boo-hoo, said Colin. I don't like water, and I don't like lakes, and I don't like boats. All right, said Miss Bagnall. You can sit here and watch over the lunch boxes. So he did, all 25 of them, 26 Miss Bagnalls. The class got into the biggest boat on the lake, and Miss Bagnall, rowed them all out into the middle of the lake. We're off! Hooray! But someone was still hiding in Biffo's pocket. Squeak! Herbert was beginning to feel hungry as usual. He could smell his second favorite food, carrots, of course, in Rachel Rushaway's pocket, all the way at the other end of the boat. Herbert wiggled out of Biffo's pocket and ran along the side of the boat. A life on the ocean wave. Eek! Shouted Miss Baggy Pants. A rat on board! Miss Bagnall wasn't expecting to see Herbert. She thought he was still locked up in his cage. To her, he looked just like a big, fat rat. Why does everyone think I look like a rat? Eek! Shouted Rachel Rushaway, who didn't know what she was shouting at. She hadn't seen Herbert. Eek! Eek! Shouted all the children who hadn't seen anything either. Zoom! Went Rachel over to the other side of the boat. Zoom! Zoom! Went all the children to get away from the rat that was really Herbert. When 24 children and a teacher stand on one side of a boat, something happens. That's right. They all landed in the water. Help! I'm drowning! Luckily, the water wasn't deep. It was only up to their waists, but they got very wet, including Miss Bagnall. Back on shore, they all dripped and shivered. Blast that rat, said Baggy Pants, who was shivering the most of all. Really big shivers. Please, Miss Bagnall, said Biffo. That wasn't a rat. That was Herbert, and he's... Biffo started to cry. Boo-hoo! Boo-hoo! Cried Biffo. Boo-hoo! All the children started to cry with him. Except Colin. Colin didn't cry at all. Instead, he walked into the water, up to his shoes, then to his knees, then up to his waist, and then he bent down and completely disappeared. The class cried harder. There was no sign of Colin. No Colin. Then suddenly, out of the water came first one arm, then another, with something in its hand, something wet and brown and fat and looking like a rat. It's Herbert! Cried the children. Colin saved him! Hooray for Colin! 3 cheers for Colin! Hooray! 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 So Colin changed his name. I named this boy Colin Courageous. And that's the end of the story. Well, not quite. Biffo doesn't bully anymore. Well, hardly. Rachel doesn't run quite as quickly, but still quickly enough. Herbert stays in his cage with plenty of corn and carrots. Brian is still the smartest boy in the world, really and truly, and the class still calls Miss Bagnall Baggy Pants, and sometimes she can hear them. Goodbye.